The Pope has arrived back at the Vatican, but not before making major news on the flight home. Speaking with reporters on the plane, he uttered a word he hadn't spoken on his Canadian tour: genocide. Pope Francis told the journalists he agrees that attempts to erase Indigenous culture through the residential school system amounted to cultural genocide.
È vero, non ho usato la parola perché non mi è venuto in mente, ma ho descritto il genocidio, no?
The Pope said while the actual word didn't come to mind while he was in Canada, everything he described in his apologies here was genocide. He said he clearly condemned what happened and repeated that he asked for forgiveness. The CBC's Megan Williams was traveling with the Pope and files this report.
The 6-day papal trip to Canada ended this morning. Throughout his trip, the Pope apologized to Indigenous peoples in Canada for the role of Catholics in running the majority of residential schools where Indigenous children were forcibly assimilated. Now, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission concluded the schools amounted to cultural genocide, but the Pope never used that word during his trip. But he did on the way back to here in Rome. There's always an in-flight press conference during these papal trips, and Canadian journalists on this one got to ask the first couple of questions, and one was about the word genocide and why the Pope didn't mention it on the trip. And he said it was true, he didn't use the word genocide because it didn't come to mind, but he said he described it, the taking away of children, changing culture, the mind, traditions, so-called race. And so he said, yes, the Catholics who were running the residential schools in Canada participated in genocide. Now, the other question asked by my CBC Indigenous colleague, Gunacio Deer, was about the calls to rescind the doctrine of discovery, which is the justification for colonization dating back to the 15th century. And the Pope said that this mentality of Europeans towards Indigenous people was wrong, and that efforts that it's necessary to sort of cleanse that past, but he didn't say anything more concrete. The 85-year-old Pope looked alert but quite tired. He said that he needs to slow down his pace. This summer he canceled a couple of other trips, but he kept the Canadian one, which shows, I think, how important it was for the Pope to come to Canada. But he says he just can't keep up the same pace because of his age and because of the knee trouble that he's been facing in recent months. But he did say it's very important for him to go to Kyiv, which is the top of his list in terms of next papal trips, and that could happen perhaps in August, perhaps in September. The Pope didn't say a date, but higher up Vatican officials say it'll probably happen within the next month or so. Megan Williams, CBC News, Rome.
Brock Pitawanakat is a coordinator of York University's Indigenous Studies program, and he's here with his reaction to the Pope linking the word genocide to what happened in Canada's residential schools.
I think it's an important development. Again, it's late. The Catholic Church was noted for being always the straggler in terms of the apologies to residential school survivors. All the other churches move faster in terms of providing documents, acknowledging past harms. And so for the Pope to, at least as he's already on his way back, acknowledge that genocide is an appropriate term. As you'll remember, when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission used that phrase cultural genocide, there was an uproar here in Canada. And you ended up having people taking different positions, suggesting that was going too far. Others would say that by qualifying it as cultural genocide as opposed to just genocide generally, that was not going far enough. I think the issue around the discovery of remains on former residential school sites has pushed us further in terms of acknowledging now we can look at this as being also about the physical genocide. I mean, clearly we've known thousands of Indigenous children lost their lives in the residential school system, and it is important that the Pope is finally acknowledging the harms that caused.
Pitawanakat says the Catholic Church has failed to live up to its promises to support and compensate those affected by residential schools. He's still hoping the Pope's visit will change that.